that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Sunday, March 29th. Your reader for the first hour will be Edwin J. Vieira, and for the second hour, your reader will be Ron Bickelman. First, a look at the forecast. Breezy and not as cold today with clouds and sun with a high of 49. Partly cloudy tonight and a low of 40. Starting off the work week with some afternoon showers in certain spots with a high of 56 and a low of 49, though not nearly as cool. On Tuesday, it'll be showers and heavy thunderstorms with a high of 65, the highest temperature for the week, and a low of 41. Those April showers come in clear on Wednesday, April 1st, with cooler morning rain and a high of 45 and a low of 28. Breezy in the afternoon on Thursday with some partly sunny conditions and a high of 43 and a low of 38. More rain on Friday as it's a high of 48 and a low of 43. And Saturday not as cool with a high of 57 and a low of 47. And now here's our first story. Retiree was among most investigated in City Police Department. Officer suspensions related to OT forging blood donation form. The Buffalo Police Department's Internal Affairs Division investigated Lieutenant Mark Sirik for many things over his nearly 18 years with the department. His most recent cases, which resulted in a 6-day suspension just before he retired late last year, included working overtime at the same time he was on unauthorized bereavement leave. Another was for conducting an improper search, and another was for submitting forged paperwork about a blood donation in order to obtain a day off from work. 4 internal affairs investigations of Sirik, a SWAT team member who was a top wage earner in the department late in his career, wrapped up just before Sirik retired on December 29th, according to department records obtained by the Buffalo News through Freedom of Information law requests. Sirik, age 53, was one of 9 Buffalo police employees who had a formal notice of suspension issued between January 1st and mid-March of this year, according to documents the News obtained. Only 4 officers were suspended in the first 3 months of 2025, according to department records. Sirik's punishments were doled out just before Police Commissioner Alfonso Wright stepped down with the transition to Mayor Sean Ryan's administration near the end of last year. Interim Police Commissioner Craig Macy declined to comment for this story, citing the cases were investigated and decisions were made under a prior administration. John Davidson, president of the Buffalo Police Benevolent Association, the union to which Sirik belonged, also declined to comment. A source who asked not to be named described Sirik as a hard worker during his career. Sirik did not return calls a reporter left 2 voicemails last week. I have no phlebotomists in my pocket. The ability to get time off in exchange for donating blood, known within the police department as blood days, has been a long-standing practice for Buffalo officers. In a story published in a 2000 headline, Blood Days, a police tradition under fire, the News found the department in 1999 paid the equivalent of $187,680 to 555 officers in compensatory time for donating blood. 1 blood donation makes an officer eligible for 1 day off, and it doesn't have to be the day the donation was made. Police can get a maximum of 2 days off per year for donating blood. Internal Affairs Lieutenant Andre M. Lloyd Sr. interviewed Sirik on February 12, 2025, about the allegation he submitted a forged blood donation slip. There were 2 slips submitted by Sirik that the investigator showed him, one that indicated the lieutenant gave blood on November 28, 2024, and another indicating a December 18, 2024 donation. Aside from the date, the slips looked identical, Lloyd said during the interview, a recording of which was obtained by the News under the Freedom of Information law. The signature of the phlebotomist and the way Sirik's name was written was the same on both forms, Lloyd said. Not only that, but the time period between the donations was too close together to represent legitimate whole blood donations, according to the guidelines established by Connect Life and other recognized blood donations, Lloyd wrote in internal affairs documents. Another thing that drew Lloyd's suspicion was the November 28, 2024 donation, which was Thanksgiving. There were no active blood drives on that day, Lloyd told Sirik in the interview. Confronted with that information, Sirik said he actually gave blood on the 27th, and the wrong date was written on his paperwork. Sirik then handed Lloyd 2 typed notes from Connect Life, which Sirik said he obtained from the organization's headquarters, and which indicated he had donated blood on the 27th of November and December 18th. Connect Life officials subsequently told Buffalo Police, quote, "They cannot validate the new form, according to a summary of the investigation. I have no connections to Connect Life. I have no phlebotomists in my pockets," Sirik told Internal Affairs in his interview. "Can you explain the reason why both of these slips look exactly the same?" Lloyd said. Sirik went on to say he went to the same Connect Life location to donate platelets each time. And the person did the exact same signature on that day, and you printed your name the same exact way, Lloyd said. "I've proven that this is a mistake on their behalf," Sirik added. But there's other IA cases. Sirik, who retired on December 29, 2025, chalked up 38 internal affairs investigations since joining the department in 2008, according to department records obtained by the news. He was among the most investigated officers in the department, according to an NYCLU review of department discipline published in 2024. He was also the top wage earner in the department 2 years in a row. In the city's 2022-23 fiscal year, Sirik was paid $283,829, including $160,276 in overtime pay, according to the city records on Open Book Buffalo. The next year, Sirik was paid $315,390, including $184,589 in overtime. Some of that pay was earned circumventing a department overtime rule, Internal Affairs found. Sirik, an E-District lieutenant at the time he retired, was found to have worked more hours than permitted by department policy, known as the 16-hour rule, which prohibits sworn officers from working more than 16 hours in a 24-hour period. Sirik was, quote, alleged to have repeatedly violated the 16-hour rule on multiple occasions between February and November 2024, according to accusations lodged in 2024. Internal Affairs investigators sustained that charged he violated the policy, which was part of the reason for his suspension. The charges in the case that were wrapped up as Sirik retired stemmed from incidents in late 2024 and early 2025. Macy, the interim police commissioner, published a formal internal notice of the suspensions on January 9th, but the orders made the effective date of the suspensions the 26th of December. Of all internal affairs investigations over his career, Sirik also had another one-day suspension in 2010 and received 4 conferences with a commanding officer, which is considered to be a form of training rather than formal discipline. Internal Affairs investigators concluded 18 of his cases with exonerations or a finding that the charges were not sustained. 4 more were either closed or administratively closed, with an additional case having been dismissed. He was reprimanded in one, and accusations of harassment and use of slurs in 2021 were determined to be unfounded. His annual state pension is $126,147, according to the state comptroller's office, and he previously worked for Erie County. In 2022, Sirik won a federal lawsuit after being sued by an ex-girlfriend who was formerly a police officer who accused him of malicious prosecution. Conflicting remarks sow confusion over the direction of Iran war. President Trump says the United States is winning the war with Iran, even as thousands of additional American troops deploy to the Middle East. He has pilloried other countries for not helping the U.S., only to say later he doesn't need their assistance. He's twice delayed deadlines for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He has both threatened to obliterate Iran's energy plants if the vital waterway remains largely shuttered, and said the U.S. was not affected by the closure. At one point this month, Trump said one of his predecessors, who he strongly suggested was a Democrat, privately told him he wished he'd taken similar actions against Iran. Representatives for every living former president quickly denied such a conversation ever happened. As the war entered its second month on Saturday, Trump's penchant for embellishments, exaggerations, and falsehoods is being tested in an environment where the stakes are much higher than an isolated political field. A president who has long embraced bluster and salesmanship to shape narratives and focus attention is confronting the unpredictability of war. Leon Panetta, who served Democratic presidents as defense secretary, CIA director, and White House chief of staff, said he has seen enough wars where truth becomes the first casualty. It's not the first administration that has not told the truth about war, he said, but the president has made it kind of a standard approach to almost any question to, in one way or another, kind of lie about what's really happening and basically describe everything as fine and that we're winning the war. Michael Rubin, a historian at the American Enterprise Institute who worked as a staff advisor on Iran and Iraq at the Pentagon from 2022 to 2024, said Trump is, quote, the first president of any party in recent history that hasn't self-constrained to live within rhetorical boundaries. So, of course, it creates a great deal of confusion, he added. To his critics, Trump's style is a sign that doesn't have a coherent long-term strategy. But for Trump, the zigs and zags seem like the point, a method that keeps his opponents and pretty much everyone else always on their heels. The approach was clear this week, in the hours before he announced the second delay of the deadline for Iran to open the strait. When asked what he would do about the deadline, Trump said he didn't know, and he had a day before he had to decide. In Trump time, a day you know what it is. That's an eternity, the Republican president said to laughter from members of his cabinet. But investors are unimpressed, with U.S. stocks closing out their worst week since the war began. To some on Capitol Hill, the freewheeling is more frustrating than amusing. Representative Gregory Meeks of New York, the top Democrat on House Foreign Affairs Committee, lamented Trump is going back and forth and constantly contradicting himself. The administration is winging it, he said. How can you trust what the president says? Republicans were not willing to go that far, but their concern was apparent heading into a 2-week break from Washington. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana said his constituents support what the president has done, but most of my people are also equally, or even more so, concerned about the cost of living, he added. Republican Representative Chip Roy of Texas, who sits on the House Budget Committee and is a member of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, said his constituents were on board with blowing some crap up. Nonetheless, he expressed reservations about the prospect of ground troops and said the administration has not provided enough details and briefings for lawmakers. Such sessions, he said, only reveal information you read in the papers. Taking out bad guys, taking out conventional weapons, taking out or at least working to take out nuclear capability, pressing to keep the strait open, all those are good things. And I've been supportive and will continue to be supportive, Roy said. But we've got to have a serious conversation about how long this is going to go. Boots on the ground, all those things. Press for further briefings and understanding of where it's all headed. While Trump has maintained deep support among Republicans, a poll this week from the Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research indicates that the president risks frustrating his voters if the U.S. gets involved in the kind of prolonged war in the Middle East he promised to avoid. Although 63% of Republicans back airstrikes against Iran military targets, the survey found only 20% back deploying American troops. That reflects the political challenges ahead for Trump, who did not prepare the country for such an extensive overseas conflict. If the war drags on or escalates, pressure on Republicans could build before the November elections, when their majorities in Congress are at risk. Some in the party have said sending in ground troops would be a red line Trump shouldn't cross. The administration also will likely need congressional support for an additional $200 billion to support the war. That amount of money, which Trump has said would be nice to have, even as he said the war was, quote, winding down, would be a tough vote on any time. But it poses particular risks for budget-conscious Republicans in an election year. White House spokesperson Anna Kelly said in a statement that Trump is, quote, right to highlight the vast success of Operation Epic Fury. Iran desperately wants to make a deal because of how badly they're being decimated, but the president reserves all options, military or otherwise, at all times, she added. Rubin, the former Iran and Iraq advisor at the Pentagon, said there could be some logic to the president's ever-evolving rhetorical approach to the war. He said Trump's initial comments about ongoing negotiations, which Iran denied, could spread suspicion and fear within the regime circles. Perhaps Donald Trump, or those advising him, simply want the Iranians to grow so paranoid they refuse to cooperate with each other, or perhaps they even turn on each other, he said. But then again, there's always a danger with Donald Trump of assuming his rhetoric is anything more than shooting from the hip. Representative Adam Smith of Washington State, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, said Trump is not going to be able to fully achieve his objectives, including the complete elimination of Iran's nuclear program in the current trajectory. And if that is the case, Smith said, the president has the option to rely on his rhetorical skills to simply say the U.S. won and end the war. As I've jokingly said, nobody I've ever met or heard of in human history is better at exaggerating his own accomplishments than Donald Trump, Smith said. So go knock yourself out and claim this was some great success. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:15 a.m. For our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:15 p.m. And now on to a front page feature. Key New York lawmakers want $750 million in Medicaid for nursing homes in the next state budget. By late January, the 120-bed Heritage Village Rehabilitation and Skilled Nursing Facility in Chautauqua County housed fewer than 40 residents. The nursing home was losing $135 a day for each resident who relied on Medicaid, the publicly funded health care for the poor, and had operated at a reduced resident census since the COVID-19 pandemic. Facing economic losses and a need to care for its other nursing homes, its nonprofit operator Heritage Ministries decided to close Heritage Village. After staying open a month longer than planned to make sure displaced residents had somewhere to go, Heritage Village closed on March 20th. It was a hard moment for our teams as we cared for so many of these residents for so many years, said Heritage Ministries CEO Lisa Hagland. Heritage Village was the latest casualty of a financial crisis causing the shutdown of nursing homes across the state, and particularly in Western New York. It's why the industry and key lawmakers are urging $750 million be added to the next state budget to directly go to nursing homes as a safeguard for care of the state's most vulnerable populations. The sum is half of a $1.5 billion fund Governor Kathy Hochul earmarked for hospitals and nursing homes in her $263 billion budget proposal. The spending plan, due April 1st, or this Wednesday, is expected to be late. Hochul, Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie, a Democrat of the Bronx, and Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, a Democrat of Yonkers, will negotiate the final budget's terms. On Wednesday, during a stop in Rochester, Hochul expressed support for nursing home aid, but remained coy on the details. Well, we are in the middle of budget negotiations as we speak, so we don't have any numbers, but we're very concerned about the viability of our nursing homes in the state, Hochul said. They take care of our most vulnerable, and they need to be stabilized, so we're going to be there to support it. I just don't have the numbers yet because we're still working on the budget. On average, nursing homes are reimbursed through Medicaid for no more than 75% of the costs of care, while highly staffed nursing homes receive no more than 60% in reimbursement, according to nursing home advocates and state lawmakers. Senator Patrick Gallivan, a Republican of Elma, the ranking Republican on the state's Senate Health Committee, and said while Medicaid is the primary payer for nursing home patients and main revenue streams for the nursing homes, the expense basis calculation for Medicaid hasn't been updated since 2007. Since 2007, advocates note the cost of providing nursing home care has increased by 51%. Medicaid reimbursements have only risen 12.8%. For too long, Medicaid rates in New York have not kept pace with the rising cost of nursing home care, Gallivan said in a statement, noting he introduced a bill to align reimbursement rates with current costs. Nursing homes in Western New York and across the state are providing care to Medicaid patients, but are being reimbursed for only about 70% of the actual cost of services. Data supplied by Leading Age New York, which represents nonprofit nursing homes, showed 76 to 100% of the nursing homes in Erie, Genesee, Allegheny, and Niagara counties, and 51 to 75% of those in Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, and Wyoming counties are operating in the red. The percentage of nursing homes operating in the red in Orleans County was listed between 0 and 50%. There are 66 nursing homes with 9,200 beds within the state health department region that covers Erie, Niagara, Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, Allegheny, Genesee, Orleans, and Wyoming counties. They serve 32,000 patients annually, with 93% coming from hospitals, according to an analysis Leading Age of New York conducted of 2024 nursing home Medicaid cost report data it obtained through the DOH through a Freedom of Information Law request. Leading Age New York found 73% of the beds in the region are in homes with negative operating margins, and Western New York has seen several nursing homes close in recent years. In 2024, the nonprofit Lutheran Social Services of Upstate New York closed its 148-bed nursing home in Jamestown, and then the nonprofit Weinberg Campus closed its once highly rated Rosa Copeland Living Center nursing home in Amherst. In the fall, the 120-bed Absolute Care of Westfield closed after it was unable to renew a lease with its landlord, a closure that affected 66 residents and 113 employees. Not a winning formula. The Brothers of Mercy Wellness Care campus in Clarence could easily be struggling more, if not for a couple of key factors. For one, the organization more than a decade ago recognized the need to diversify its campus and added independent living, assisted living, and memory care services, said CEO Peter Eimer. While the core of the campus is still the Nursing and Rehabilitation Center, it has other revenue streams coming in. At the 240-bed nursing home, the payer mix has helped Brothers of Mercy record positive margins in 2025 and so far in 2026 after the nursing home lost money for several years coming out of the pandemic. The nursing home is currently 210 residents, and 44% of them, or 90 residents, are covered by Medicaid, Eimer noted. And yet, Medicaid only accounts for 25% of their revenue streams. It's not a winning formula, Eimer said. Brothers of Mercy Nursing Home receives 40% of its revenue from private pay, the term for when a resident or family pays for the cost of care rather than relying on insurance or government programs. That helps offset the costs of Medicaid not covering the daily costs of care. Eimer said Brothers of Mercy sees a strong private pay percentage due to the quality of its nursing homes, but it still faces 220 residents now, rather than a full 240-bed capacity due to a lack of staff. If we have more staff, we could put more residents in beds, Eimer said. The operator of Schofield Residence in the town of Tonawanda and the Greenfields Continuing Care Community in Lancaster is doing okay, at least, comparative to the rest of the market, said Christopher Coing, president and CEO of Niagara Lutheran Health System. Coing attributed in part to his team doing all it can to trim expenses. For example, his organization created Lineage Care Group, a passive super parent that includes Niagara Lutheran and Schofield residents, and aims to reduce overhead and back office costs, increase scale, and maximize Medicaid reimbursement. But Coing continues to fight for a better operating environment for nursing homes, noting he now spends 10 to 15 hours of his week devoted to advocacy. And now on to world news. Iran's insurgent tactics hold the world economy hostage. 1 month into their war with Iran, the United States and Israel find themselves confronting an opponent that fights more like an insurgency than a nation, using increasingly limited resources to inflict maximum pain. Despite being battered daily by airstrikes from two of the world's most sophisticated militaries, Iran has shown it can be a torment to its Gulf Arab neighbors and Israel with missiles and drones, and maintain a stranglehold on the world's economy primarily through threats. Tehran's ability to control the flow of traffic and therefore the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz is its biggest strategic advantage. And in fact, it's a tactic that Iran's very own proxies have adopted for years under decades of its tutelage as the leaders of the self-described axis of resistance. Meanwhile, Iran's economy, long ago cut off from the global markets by sanctions, is broadly insulated from the pain it is now inflicting on others. The chokehold on the strait is causing oil prices to skyrocket, stock markets to plunge, and the cost of many basic goods to rise, putting pressure on President Donald Trump that could lead him to escalate the conflict further. While Iran has found some success with cutting off its strait, it has its own problems lurking at home that the U.S. and Israel may be able to exploit the longer the war goes on. But its theocracy's path to victory through insurgent-like tactics remains fairly simple. Just survive. The Islamic Republic understands that it cannot defeat the United States militarily, wrote Shukriya Badost, a Middle East security analyst. Instead, its objective is both simpler and more strategic: survive the war long enough to claim victory. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow mouth of the Persian Gulf through which a fifth of all oil and natural gas once passed, now finds itself largely devoid of traffic. The Islamic Republic allows through only the shipments it wants and at a price it dictates. Even with nearly all of its navy destroyed, Iran can hold the waterway hostage through an arsenal of missiles and drones built up over the decades. Countries in Asia, the primary customers for oil that passes through the strait, are feeling the pinch most acutely, but the market for oil is global, so drivers in Europe and the US are also seeing price hikes. And since oil is so fundamental to the world's economy, its cost is baked into the manufacture and transport of many goods. It's not just gasoline prices that are rising. That's bad news for Trump, who was already struggling to show Americans he could bring down the cost of living ahead of the midterm elections this November. Ending the standoff isn't easy. One way would be to negotiate a ceasefire, and Trump says talks are progressing, something Iran denies. If that fails, the U.S. and Israel would either have to decide they've achieved enough and walk away from the war, or dramatically escalate the conflict to force the strait open. Trump's already ordered thousands more paratroopers and Marines into the region, and he has set a new deadline, delayed twice, of 8 p.m. on April 6th, for Iran to reopen the strait. Otherwise, he's threatened to begin bombing power plants in the nation. Trump's preference remains escalate to de-escalate, the Risk Advisory Eurasia Group said in an analysis Thursday. The U.S. is moving more ships and ground troops into the region and will be better prepared to escalate in mid-April. But Iran has shown itself resilient to the battering it's received thus far. Trump said about 9% of Iran's missile arsenal remains. There was no way to independently verify that figure, but even if accurate, Tehran still has ways to wreak havoc. With its aircraft badly destroyed and its air defenses at their weakest, Iran still maintains a vast network of air and sea bases, many built up decades ago. It also has more recently built underground bases, which, along with missile launchers disguised as commercial trucks, allow it to hide its launch sites until the last minute. Keeping mobile launchers on the move can protect them from airstrikes. The strategy, known as shoot and scoot, is a mainstay of many insurgent groups, including Yemen's Houthi rebels. The Iran-backed group itself successfully disrupted international shipping in the Red Sea. Shiite militias in Iraq, also backed by Iran, used similar tactics against U.S. troops there. Both have survived, if not thrived, while being repeatedly targeted. Families criticize Mexico's report on 130,000 missing. Mexico's government said in a new report Friday it identified signs of life for a third of the country's 130,000 registered missing people, an announcement that was quickly criticized by a number of search groups who called it another attempt to undermine the depth of Mexico's disappearance crisis. The mounting criticism cut to the heart of a fierce debate over how Mexico tracks disappearances, which have soared since the beginning of the drug war in 2006. While authorities say figures are overcounted, families say the number of missing people in Mexico is actually far higher. Both blame what they see as a lack of reliable data on failures by local governments and deep-seated impunity. Mexican authorities said that by cross-referencing things like vaccination records, birth and marriage registries, and tax filings, officials found that 40,367 people, around 31% of reported disappearances, showed some activity in government records since they've been reported missing. Marcela Figueroa, a top security official, said it indicated that those people might still be alive. Using that search method and consulting with a number of search groups, she said the government was able to track down 5,269 people and mark them as found. Figueroa described many of those cases as voluntary absences, citing a number of examples of men leaving their partners for another woman, being reported as missing, and women running away from abusive relationships. Not all disappearances are the same, she said, adding that the government was constantly working to locate Mexico's missing people. But Hector Flores, a leader of a search collective in the heart of Mexico's disappearance crisis, the state of Jalisco, said he saw the report as misleading and said the government's methodology lacked transparency. Groups like his have accused the government for years of trying to disappear the disappeared to save face on an international stage. Historic corruption and lack of investigation into such cases has fueled distrust among families who believe that changes to the registry could cut real cases from the list and hinder search efforts. For us, it's just another attempt by the administration to hide and downplay the numbers and continue to paint a picture that doesn't reflect the reality of what we're living through, said Flores, whose 19-year-old son was forcibly disappeared by agents from the Jalisco State Prosecutor's Office in 2021. According to the figures shared, 46,000 or 36% of those registered as disappeared had missing data like names and dates that made searches impossible. Meanwhile, 43,128 or 33% showed no registered activities in government databases. Of those, less than 10% are under criminal investigation, something Figueroa called a failure by Mexican authorities. Figueroa added, the government was more vigorously monitoring local prosecutors' offices that have failed to investigate and accurately document cases of missing people and has sought to boost the number of cases being investigated. Society and the families can trust in the records of people of better tools to search for people. The reinterpreted figures are part of a larger effort to bring order to a convoluted data set that connects to a collective trauma scarring the Latin American nation. Forcibly disappearing people has long been a tactic by cartels to consolidate control through terror while also concealing homicide numbers. Some of Mexico's most haunting cases of mass disappearances, like the disappearance of 43 students in central Mexico, have also been tied to state actors. The 130,000 people registered as missing since 2006 is enough to fill a small city, and the faces of missing people on flyers line the streets of Mexico's largest cities. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:30 a.m., and for our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:30 p.m. No Kings rallies across the U.S. protest Trump's policies. Organizers of Saturday's No Kings rallies across the country are predicting that the protests against the actions of President Trump and his administration could add up to one of the largest demonstrations in U.S. history, with Minnesota taking the center stage. Organizers say more than 3,100 events were registered in all 50 states, with more than 9 million people expected to participate. In Washington, hundreds of marchers moved through the streets past the Lincoln Memorial and into the National Mall, holding signs that read, "Put down the crown, clown," and, quote, "Regime change begins at home." Demonstrators rang bells, played drums, and chanted, "No Kings." The Trump administration's aggressive immigration enforcement actions, particularly in Minnesota, were just one item on a long list of protesters' grievances that also included the war in Iran and the Trump administration's rollback of transgender rights. In New York City, Donna Lieberman, executive director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, described Trump as the nation's bully-in-chief and said Minneapolis residents, quote, "forced the wannabe king to withdraw his shock troops." "They want us all to be afraid to protest," she said during a news conference. "They want us to be afraid that there's nothing we can do to stop them. But you know what? They're wrong. Dead wrong." The White House dismissed the rallies. Spokesperson Abigail Jackson described the protest as the product of, quote, "leftist funding networks with little real public support." Jackson said in a statement also that the only people who care about these Trump derangement therapy sessions are the reporters who are paid to cover them. The National Republican Congressional Committee was also sharply critical. "These Hate America rallies are where the far left's most violent deranged fantasies get a microphone," said Maureen O'Toole, spokesperson for the NRCC. Organizers have designated the rally at the Minnesota Capitol in St. Paul as the national flagship event in recognition of how the state, where federal agents fatally shot 2 people who were monitoring Trump's immigration crackdowns, became an epicenter of resistance. Headlining the observance will be Bruce Springsteen performing Streets of Minneapolis, which he wrote in response to the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and in tribute to the thousands of Minnesotans who took to the streets over the winter. Springsteen's Land of Hope and Dreams American Tour, which has a No Kings theme, kicks off Tuesday in Minneapolis. Minnesota organizers have told state officials they expected 100,000 people to converge on the Capitol grounds, where last June's event drew an estimated 80,000 people. The St. Paul rally will also feature singer Joan Baez, actor Jane Fonda, and Senator Bernie Sanders, as well as a long list of other activists, labor leaders, and elected officials. Rallies are also planned in more than a dozen other countries, from Europe to Latin America to Australia. Ezra Levine, a co-executive director of Indivisible, a group spearheading the events, said in an interview. "Countries with constitutional monarchies call the protests no tyrants," he said. For those unable to attend in person, another activist group, Stand Up for Science, is hosting a virtual and accessible event online. On Saturday morning in Paris, several hundred people, mostly Americans living in France, along with French labor unions and human rights organizations, gathered at the Bastille. "I protest all of Trump's illegal, immoral, reckless, and feckless endless wars," Ada Shen, the Paris No Kings organizer, said. In Rome, thousands of people marched with defiant chants aimed at Premier Giorgia Meloni, whose right-wing government saw its referendum for streamlining Italy's judiciary badly fail earlier this week, amid criticism that it was a threat to the court's independence. Protesters waved banners protesting the Israeli and U.S. attacks on Iran, calling for a world free from wars. In London, people protesting the war in Iran held banners that said, "Stop the far right, stand up to racism." U.S. organizers told reporters in an online news conference Thursday they expected Saturday's protest to be larger than the first 2 rounds of No Kings rallies, which they estimate drew more than 5 million people in June and more than 7 million in October. 2/3 of the RSVPs have come from outside of major urban centers, Greenberg said, listing registration surges in conservative-leaning states like Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Utah, South Dakota, and Louisiana, as well as in competitive suburban areas of Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona. This administration's actions are angering not just the Democratic voters or folks in the big blue city centers, they're crossing a line for people in red and rural areas in the suburbs and all over the country, said Leah Greenberg, the other co-executive director of Indivisible. House offers stopgap funding for DHS as the standoff deepens. Angered by a bipartisan Senate plan to end a partial shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, House Republicans countered with an 8-week funding extension, virtually ensuring a continuation of the standoff. The House on Friday passed a stopgap funding bill for the department that Senate Democrats warn has no chance of winning their approval. With lawmakers fleeing town for a 2-week recess, there appeared to be little prospect of bringing the 42-day partial shutdown to an end anytime soon. On a mostly party line vote of 213 to 203, the House adopted a rule deeming the stopgap funding extension passed. That bill, which replaces the text of the Senate-passed measure, would extend funding for the entire department through May 22nd and provide back pay for workers whose pay was frozen during the shutdown. 3 Democrats joined all Republicans in support of the bill, Representatives Henry Cuellar of Texas, Don Davis of North Carolina, and Marie Gluesenkamp Perez of Washington. The House vote put the 2 chambers at loggerheads over a path for ending the shutdown. Hopes for reaching a solution had briefly soared in the wee hours of Friday morning when the Senate, on a voice vote, passed an amended bill that will provide full-year funding for all DHS except for Immigration and Customs Enforcement and most of Customs and Border Patrol, the 2 agencies that have been at the center of this partisan standoff over immigration enforcement practices. Senate GOP leaders had defended their measure as a way to end the shutdown without giving in to Democratic demands for new restrictions on immigration agents. They said additional funding for 2 immigration agencies would come through a separate budget reconciliation bill in the coming weeks that avoids the risk of a Democratic filibuster. But House Republicans immediately shot down the proposal and criticized the Senate for jamming them. Many said they couldn't stomach a bill that omits funding for vital agencies. I would not vote for something, to tell you the truth, that said I was going to give zero money for border security and homeland security, House Appropriations Chairman Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma, said during a Rules Committee hearing Friday on the measure. Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, meanwhile called the Senate bill a joke and said he was quite convinced it can't be that every Senate Republican read the language of the bill. House Democrats, however, support the Senate-passed legislation, which largely mirrors a Democratic proposal the party had been pushing for weeks. The Senate bill would open every part of the Department of Homeland Security that actually keeps Americans secure, said House Minority Whip Catherine Clark, Democrat of Massachusetts. That's why the Senate passed unanimously this morning, but House Republicans refused to take yes for an answer, she said. The House-passed funding extension, meanwhile, was already a no-go for Senate GOP leadership, according to an aide. It won't pass the Senate, and everyone knows it, the aide said. The easiest way to make a law is to adopt the Senate product. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, also said his conference would not back the House continuing resolution. We will not give a blank check to President Trump's lawless and deadly immigration militia without reforms, he said. A 60-day CR that locks into the status quo is dead on arrival in the Senate, and Republicans know it. The tension between the House and Senate was on full display on the testy Friday afternoon Rules Committee hearing that repeatedly devolved into shouting matches, with Republicans bemoaning the Senate actions while Democrats railed against House GOP leadership. The House has taken issue in recent months with repeated attempts by the Senate to force the chamber to fall in line on key votes of legislation. The Senate's proposal operates on the mere hope that funding from reconciliation can be used for every aspect of pay and resources for our nation's border protection, Rules Chairwoman Virginia Fox, Republican of North Carolina, said at the hearing. We don't operate on hope. We operate on process, deliberation, and action, she said. Larger fights on federal immigration enforcement funding loom over lawmakers' return in mid-April. The Senate's latest DHS funding proposal notably did not include the list of changes pursued by Democrats in negotiations with the White House for weeks, although the party has contended that bipartisan discussions over potential ICE restrictions will continue. Meanwhile, a bipartisan cohort of House Republicans led by Representatives Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican of Pennsylvania, and Tom Suozzi, Democrat of New York, released their own proposal that includes some of Democrats' overhauls and would also fund DHS at previously negotiated fiscal 2026 levels. But neither Republican nor Democratic leadership from either chamber has publicly supported the effort, and disagreements about policy changes proved to be the downfall of previous shutdown negotiations. Some Senate Democrats are already setting their sights on forcing consideration of their proposal, including banning masks for immigration agents if Republicans move forward with reconciliation plans to provide further immigration enforcement funding, which will guarantee marathon voting sessions on the floor. Such changes would face a tough chance getting adopted as part of the Republicans' go-it-alone package, but they could force Republicans to take difficult votes to defeat proposals Democrats argue are popular with voters in an election year. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time for our morning listeners is 9:40 a.m. For our afternoon listeners, the time is 4:40 p.m. And now on to business news. Book Corner owner decides to keep beloved store open. Every year, Jeffrey Morrow makes a decision whether to take on one more year as the owner of Book Corner, a beloved sprawling bookstore on Main Street in Niagara Falls. He planned to retire at age 65, but that birthday's been in the rearview mirror for a few years now. So, every year since then, he's decided whether to take his retirement or whether to keep the store open another 365 days. His most recent plan was to let the Book Corner see its 100th birthday in 2027, have an epic centennial birthday bash, then walk off into the sunset. Now plans have changed, and much to the delight of many, the latest plan keeps the bookstore open. But if you're going to visit, you'd better call first. Now I'm just going to get up and do things and leave the store anytime I want, Morrow said. Before, Morrow would take 1 week off every year in January to go surfing in the Bahamas for his birthday. Now he expects to take off about a month and a half in total sporadically during the year, allowing him to live his life, but allowing book lovers to hang on to their reader's paradise. I think it's a win-win. I still love what I do, and people love the store, so that way we don't end it. But I want to be able to just do anything I want now, he said. That's great news for any of the book lovers in Western New York who, after nearly a century of somehow still finding out the Book Corner exists, opened in 1927, the same year as the famed Strand bookstore in New York City. The Book Corner has 3 floors of new and used books, as well as a growing collection of vinyl records. There's a performance space on the second floor with a grand piano, which Morrow lets groups use for free and hosts local authors. There are vintage artworks, memorabilia, and other cool curiosities at every turn, as well as 2 resident cats to put the cherry on top of the eclectic cake. In one report, the New York Times called the Book Corner a beacon of light in the pall of blight of downtown Niagara Falls. The store was purchased by Morrow's father, Pete, in 1962 and moved to its current location 20 years later. Jeffrey Morrow bought the shop from his father in 2001. The Book Corner will celebrate its 99th birthday on June 1st. Morrow still plans to keep the store open 10 a.m. to 4, Monday through Saturday, but encourages shoppers to call ahead and make sure he'll be there. It probably will make some people unhappy too, but you just got to do the best you can when you're in retail, Morrow said. You're never going to make everybody happy. If you visit the store, park in the back parking lot and enter from the rear entrance. Will Bob's open more furniture stores here? Interesting questions. Bob's Discount Furniture is a bright spot among furniture retailers these days, as many others have struggled. Buffalo Niagara has just 2 stores in Amherst and Orchard Park, but could we get more? The Connecticut-based furniture retailer, which just completed its initial public offering, is leaning into expansion. Last year, it opened 20 stores and entered 2 markets, North Carolina and Vermont. That left the company with 209 locations. Now Bob's has plans to open to more than double its brick-and-mortar holdings to 500 by 2035. Furniture stores have been operating amid a weak housing market, low consumer confidence, rising prices, and volatile tariffs. But Bob's sees a reason to celebrate. The company saw its fourth quarter net revenue increase 8% year over year to $648.8 million. The revenue increase was driven by new stores opening and comparable sales growth. Bob said it attracts customers across all income levels, but saw a meaningful increase in new customers earning over $150,000, underscoring the broad appeal of its value proposition. The over 150,000 income demos have grown faster than the others, said CEO Bill Barton on a call with analysts. They've all grown this year, but the more affluent ones have grown faster. Their buying behavior shifted up from a focus on good to more of our better or mid-tier pricing, which is very encouraging. Bob's Discount Furniture entered the Buffalo Niagara market in 2024. The deeply discounted furniture retailer runs on an everyday low price concept and doesn't run sales events. In addition to daily discounted furniture, Bob's is known for the cafe areas in the middle of the store, offering free ice cream and cookies. Personal finance. Scams go up during tax season. Robocalls, texts, and phishing emails from scammers are up this tax season compared to previous years, with artificial intelligence likely increasing fraud attempts, according to the Consumer Protection Bureau of the Federal Trade Commission. Consumer advocates and government officials urge the public to stay wary, and remember, the IRS will not contact you directly by text or phone. Here's what you need to know. 'Tis the season. Each year, the IRS releases its dirty dozen of tax scams that target taxpayers. At the top of the list is impersonation of the agency by email, text, or phone. The IRS reported over 600 social media impersonators during fiscal year 2025 and urges people not to click links or open attachments from unexpected messages. The IRS also reminds taxpayers it does not leave urgent, threatening, pre-recorded messages, call to demand immediate payment, or threaten arrest. Scammers often use alarming language and QR codes to send people to fake websites where they ask the taxpayer to verify accounts or enter personal information, according to the IRS. Links may also install malware or malicious software. AI-enabled IRS impersonation by phone, robocalls, voice mimicry, or spoofed caller ID is also increasing, according to the agency. As phone scams evolve, AI provides new computer-generated tactics and spoofed caller identification to look legitimate. In this vein, identity theft is one of the most common forms of fraud around tax season, said Rosario Mendez, an attorney for the Bureau of Consumer Protection at the FTC. Mendez defines this type of theft as the misuse of one's social security number or other personal information, often to collect a tax refund. People usually discover this when they go to file their tax returns and discover someone else already filed it, she said. For the records of the IRS, that is, it's already happened, but it's not the person. It's an identity theft. A deluge of scams. Eva Velasquez, CEO of the Identity Theft Resource Center, said the ITRC also tracked an increase in scams and identity theft attempts over the past several years, likely aided by AI-generated messages. We're seeing an uptick in phishing emails, fake texts, even phone calls, Velasquez said. Scammers are trying to get you to engage in any manner, talk to them, click the link, share your personal data, or share access to your devices or accounts. The sheer volume and level of sophistication suggests AI is being leveraged, according to Velasquez. Deluge is the best word I can think of because it's relentless, she said. Type, don't tap. Whenever possible, according to Velasquez, the practice when receiving any of these messages is type, don't tap. That is, rather than tapping on any link sent in any kind of message, or type in the URL of the official website of the IRS, irs.gov, or whichever agency is supposedly contacting you. Go to the source. Don't click on any of these links, she said. But scammers hit all ages. According to Kathy Stokes, Director of Fraud Prevention Programs for the AARP, younger people more frequently file reports stating they've been scammed, but older adults report losing more money than younger consumers. That's because they have more money to lose, she said. If you suspect fraud or a message seems suspicious, Stokes emphasized the importance of slowing down and talking to someone. When someone receives a notification that sounds strange, scary, or urgent, if they stop to talk to a friend or family member or someone they trust, they can typically figure out it's a scam. And lastly, ask for help. If someone already used your social security number to file a tax return before you, it's important to let the IRS know. You should also visit the site identitytheft.gov to report the theft, Mendez said. At the end of that reporting process, the government will give you a personal recovery plan. If a scammer has used your social security number to file a tax return, it's possible the same thief could use it to open bank accounts, credit cards, or file for unemployment, she said. Alan Butler, executive director of the Electronic Privacy Information Center, echoed this, encouraging victims of scams to seek identity theft monitoring going forward as well. That said, he warns people not to pay high costs for these services, which are sometimes shady themselves. People can be victimized not only once with the theft of their identity, but a second time because the monitoring services are trying to sell them as well. As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That number again being 716-821-5555. Kathleen K. Adams, nee Amari. Daniel E. Barry Jr., Esquire. Carlton J. Berg. Charlene A. Birmingham, nee Shearer. Carol A. Bridge, nee Mendola. Mary L. Brill, nee Moore. Mary Brown, nee Ivanovich. Giovanna Cantalfio. Rose Sarasa, nee Lacourte. Frank Pete A. Claybo. Mary Patricia Collins. Geraldine A. Jerry Comerford, Boucard. Michael N. Costello. Elizabeth Caroline Kersons. Nancy J. Darling, nee Laud. Joseph T. Doria. Lillian G. Dixon, nee Olar, formerly Hanham. Holly A. Donaldson, nee Augsburger. Alice A. Dorosiak, nee Pater. Donald Dust. Charles T. Firamuska, Jr. Karen A. Foley. Scott E. Friedman. Robert E. Gallagher. John E. Haland. Donald E. Hebler. George C. Held. Mark G. Hogg. Richard L. Ignazak. Mary Eileen Kruzer, nee Cuthbert. Thomas H. Kubik. David Blakely Lane. Kathleen M. Locke, nee Scully. Lael F. Lewis. Jewel Lucas, Minor. Brian Marsh. Christine Mayo James. Michael F. McManus. Jason M. Meaden. Ronald Morgan. Wayne Honker Niederhauser. Carol M. Norrie, nee Hitches. Carl Randall. Scott D. Rainey. Anthony P. Rogacki. Phyllis Pigzik Ruzik. Carol Myers Shubel. Rita Slorinsky. Joseph M. Tock. Wendy Tragish. Nancy A. Varco, nee Gullo. Blake J. Verpoten. David G. Wentland. Edward N. Wilson. Veroni Yonkers. Irene K. Zamrock, nee Kuzara. Ruth Zukowski, nee Witkowski. Edward N. Wilson. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That number again being 716-821-5555. And now on to Royal Stars from Georgia Nichols. It's the horoscopes. Happy birthday for Sunday, March 29th, 2026. You are calm, steady, and laid back. You are also intelligent, perceptive, and sensitive. This is a year of service for you, perhaps service to family. The stars show the kind of day you'll have, with 5 being dynamic, 4 being positive, 3 being average, 2 is so-so, and 1 is difficult. For Aries, you're having a 4-star day. If you're wise, you'll use the energy of this weekend to get as much done as possible. More than that, you can make great strides in achieving important objectives. Tonight, work. For Taurus, you're having a 4-star day. This is a year of learning and finding ways to expand your world. Activities with children, socializing with others, and finding ways to express your creative talents will be meaningful for you today. Tonight, play. For Gemini, you're having a 3-star day. Relax at home today. Someone older or more established might have excellent advice for you. Take time to sort out what is important to you, because you have a chance to boost your assets and your earnings. Tonight, relax. For Cancer, you're having a 4-star day. This weekend is an excellent time for you to work toward important goals. Tonight, conversations. For Leo, you're having a 4-star day. You're born, you live, then you die. The time in between is how you spend your days, is your life. This is a good day to ask yourself what it is you want your life to be. Tonight, check your possessions. Virgo, a 4-star day. Today, the moon is in your sign, giving you a slight advantage over other signs. Perhaps you can use this to deal with an ex-partner or old friends who are back in your life. Tonight, you win. For Libra, it's a 3-star day. Don't be demanding when dealing with others today. In fact, give those who are close to you lots of breathing room. Tonight, privacy. For Scorpio, a 4-star day. This is a productive weekend, which is why you should take advantage of this opportunity and get as much done as possible. You can improve your job. Tonight, friendships. Sagittarius, a 3-star day. Be aware that you're high vis today, which means more people notice you than usual. This also means that some people will know private details about your personal life. Tonight, you are noticed. Capricorn, it's a 4-star day. Today, 2 influences are at play. One makes you want to run away and join the circus. You want to goof off and have fun and learn something new. Tonight, explore. For Aquarius, a 4-star day. You can learn a lot today, but you can also teach. Even in a casual discussion with someone else, you'll be persuasive. Tonight, check your finances. And Pisces, a 3-star day. You're imaginative and you will see new uses for something you own, new applications. You also might see new ways to earn money, either in a different job or maybe something on the side. And now for Today in History. On this date, March 29th, in 1943, World War II rationing of meat, fats, and cheese began, limiting American consumers to store purchases of an average of about 2 pounds a week of beef, pork, and lamb and mutton. In 1951, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were convicted in New York of conspiracy to commit espionage for the Soviet Union. They were executed in June of 1953. In 1961, the 23rd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified, allowing residents of Washington, D.C. to vote in presidential elections. In 1971, Army Lieutenant William Calley Jr. was convicted of murdering 22 Vietnamese citizens in the 1968 My Lai massacre. Initially sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor, Calley's sentence would be commuted by President Richard Nixon to 3 years of house arrest. In 1973, the last U.S. combat troops left South Vietnam, ending America's direct military involvement in the Vietnam War. In 1974, a group of Chinese farmers digging a well struck fragments of terracotta buried underground. Archaeologists would ultimately discover terracotta sculptures of more than 8,000 soldiers and other army figures. Known as the Terracotta Army, it would become one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Sunday, March 29th on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your reader for this hour has been Edwin J. Vieira. Please stay tuned for Ron Bickelman in the second hour. Thank you for listening.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window, in the Apple App Store, or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
Buffalo News. Your reader is Ron Bickelman. No Kings protesters here join thousands across the U.S. I'm not proud of my country for the first time in my life, one says. Nancy Wojda came because she said President Trump isn't fit to lead the country. Mary Rose Fabry was here because she said the president's policies toward immigrants and women are reprehensive. And Dermot Coffey attended because he wants to show there's a broad community of people who love America but oppose what Trump has done in office. They were among the scores of people who attended Saturday's No Kings rally at the corner of Niagara Falls Boulevard and Brighton Road in the town of Tonawanda. What it does is negates the attempt to intimidate the population into accepting the fiats and outrageous behavior of Trump and his administration, said Coffey, a member of Northtown's Rise Up and the event organizers. People can protest and they won't be on their own. The Tonawanda event was one of 3,200 rallies planned Saturday in all 50 states. Representatives from Indivisible, the group that began the No Kings movement last year, told media outlets. A White House spokesperson earlier in the week dismissed the planned protest in a statement to National Public Radio as Trump's derangement therapy sessions. About 100 protests were planned in New York, including 6 in Erie and Niagara counties, and a similar number in the region's outlying counties. The event held at Niagara Square downtown was the region's largest. This was the third No Kings protest held since Trump had returned to the White House last year, following events held last June and October that drew millions of protesters, and the first since the war in Iraq began. Organizers said earlier in the week they hoped Saturday would mark the largest single day of nonviolent protests in American history. United we stand, divided we fall. Trump is setting out to divide us, said Fabry, 62, of Amherst, who was a teacher before she began losing her vision. That's why he stands up there and makes all these lies about voting and about all these gulag places they're building, the detention centers. Tonawanda No Kings event was held at an intersection where Trump foes gathered weekly for about a year, according to Northtown's Rise Up members. They said they picked this location because it's kitty corner to this spot at the edge of the Boulevard Mall where the president's supporters have gathered for years. A small number of Trump fans were there Saturday, with one using an amplified megaphone to shout that the No Kings protesters were throwing a temper tantrum and to remind them that when they went home in the afternoon, Trump would remain president. The No Kings attendees played music from a speaker to try to drown out the comments from across the street. By noon Saturday, dozens of No King protesters stood in a group running north from Brighton to, on the Tonawanda side of Niagara Falls Boulevard. They held signs reading, "I want my grandchildren to know that I did not stay silent. Make America sane again. No King since 1776. And Kamala was right about everything. I don't like him. He's an awful man, an awful person. He's just not somebody I want to lead my country." Wojda, 76, of Alden, said of the president, "I'm not proud of my country for the first time in my life." The drivers of numerous vehicles heading south on Niagara Falls Boulevard honked their horns in solidarity as they passed by the protesters, who were alternately bathed in sunshine and snowflakes on a chilly Saturday. Wilson's brother, Jim Rice, 74, of the town of Tonawanda, said he attended both King rallies last year as well. My biggest concerns are they're usurping the government, and my biggest concerns really are that Congress enables him, Rice said. I mean, he can do whatever he wants to be. He can do whatever he wants to be, but Congress lets him disobey the Constitution and gets away with breaking laws. Peggy Madison, 71, of the town of Tonawanda, says she's deeply concerned about the direction of the country, and she hopes an event like Saturday's rally lead to change starting this fall. I hope everybody remembers to vote in November, Madison said. Continuing along in local news, Vinyl is asking tough questions of Erie County Sheriff. Her political opponents have noticed. Democratic Erie County legislator Jeannie Vinnell has been generating a lot of attention recently for aggressive questioning of the inner workings of the sheriff's office, and now she finds herself on the receiving end of a coordinated messaging campaign. She hates cops and public safety, said Erie County Republican Party Chairman Michael Cracker. If she can go after law enforcement, she will. Her comments follow up on a statement he issued 2 weeks ago calling out Vinyl's anti-police rhetoric and far-left policies. Within a day, Cracker's statement was joined by a similar one from Sheriff John Garcia about her insult to his staff and the reference to crony employees. And one from Erie County Police Benevolent Association President Simon Biskevich regarding Vinyl's irresponsible and unfounded claims. Vinyl of Amherst said she's not anti-police and thinks Garcia has some good qualities. But she's going to keep challenging the sheriff's office when she believes the office is protecting cops and have broken the public trust or promoting policy spending plans that hurt taxpayers. Many legislators believe the sheriff's office needs reform, she said, but they are reluctant to publicly change the sheriff's office. It's not that they don't want it done, they just don't want to be the one that are doing it, Vinyl said. They don't want the blowback of claiming that you're anti-police because you're questioning police. Blowback is something Vinyl knows as legislator's sharpest critic of the sheriff's office. She has voted against a number of sheriff's initiatives that said she considered duplicative, unneeded, or too expensive, a notable exception being her vote in favor of costly pension improvements to jail officers. After the recent public statements against her, she saw online comments insulting her looks and intellect about other more unsavoring adjectives from members of the conservative 1791 society. She takes that in stride as the public's First Amendment right, she said. If people stoop to that level, it means there's something that they don't feel that they can fight fair about, Vinyl said. She also said she rejects the notion that she's too confrontational. They've been probably used to unanimous votes on all police things for a long period of time, she said. I don't think there's wrong or right about it, but that one person out of 11 voting against them ruffles feathers so much. I think it's healthy in a democracy to have people, no matter what their position, whether it's the sewer authority or whatever, to ask questions. While a few other Democratic legislators have raised questions and concerns, exchanges between Vinyl and sheriff's officers are typically longer and more heated. Cracker said he believes Vinyl has an axe to grind. Legislator Vinyl, who stands out uniquely as an antagonist to the sheriff and to the men and women of Erie County Sheriff's Office, he said. So it seems pretty clear that she's not interested in having an honest discussion about how we can improve public safety in the community. Sparks that lit the fire. The most recent dust-up stemmed from Garcia's appearance before the legislature on March 12th, in which he defended the new policy regarding the use of take-home vehicles. Vinyl disputed Garcia's statements, calling them contradictory. Garcia responded that Vinyl is criticizing the sheriff's vehicles policy as an excuse to launch a political attack, furthered her own ambitions or carry water of other elected leaders. If you drive down the street and my radio is on, there's an active shooting, I'm not going to put a vest on. I'm going there to stop it, he said. You know who's not doing that? You. Vinyl, a civil rights lawyer, denied having self-serving motives. She chairs the legislature's Fleet Policies Committee, created after a controller's office audit criticizing how the county manages its taxpayer-funded fleet of cars. The audit found lax accountability, policy violations, and abuses of the county's gas systems. The audit also criticized the lack of cooperation and transparency from the sheriff's office. The use of the sheriff's office vehicles has drawn more scrutiny due to the case of Daniel D. Granville, a narcotics chief who crashes county-owned pickup truck into 7 parked cars in Buffalo's Lower West Side in 2024. Multiple witnesses stated he appeared intoxicated. The matter remained under wraps until it was exposed by local media a year later. During the last committee meeting, Vinyl objected to the sheriff's administrators, who are not sworn police officers, from getting unmarked take-home cars, among other concerns. It's a follow-up interview with WIVB. She said the sheriff has no unilateral authority to waste taxpayer money by giving crony employees free vehicles at the county's expense. Cracker, the sheriff, and the union seized on her use of the term crony. It's appalling to me that an elected official would utter such an insult, Garcia said in a statement. Our law enforcement personnel deserve respect, praise, and admiration, not indignity from a county legislator. Vinal's defense. Vinal said crony is someone who receives unfair advantages and protection from someone in a position of authority due to their close personal ties and friendship. She said that explains why so many administrators in Garcia's inner circle get free unmarked cars and why the sheriff's office did so little follow-up investigation in the Granville case and continued to give new cars to deputies who crashed their old ones. The Police Benevolent Association union statement by Biskevich called Vinal's comments irresponsible. Deputies are sworn law enforcement officers who are held to some of the highest ethical and professional standards in public service, he said. Vinal responded, well, we know that Granville did it. She also mentioned Aaron Nagley, the sheriff's technical sergeant of fleet operations, who crashed his county-owned pickup truck in 2020 and was charged with driving while intoxicated. Officials said both Granville and Nagley were reissued county vehicles. Vinal said that once law enforcement officers breaks public trust, it can't be retrieved. Garcia has previously referenced the duties and stresses of the job. He declined to comment for this article. Biskevich offered to further discuss the county's position and did not follow through. Vinal said that more than 95% of police officers are good people performing important work, but their efforts are harmed when superiors minimize or hide their abuses by a minority, reinforcing the perception that all officers are bad. They're the ones that are truly fundamentally anti-police, she said. She also said that despite Garcia's apathy toward her, she thinks she has positive qualities. He's smart, and I think he has a loving personality. I think all those things are really good, Vinal said. I think he does care about our community. I think that the only thing that he can improve upon is could be easier for him to make the decision of acting self-policing in consequences. She also said Garcia needs to work harder to lower the growing personnel costs and rebuild public trust. UFO researchers believe disclosure may be on the way. UFOs, at a time anyone who even brought them up risked being called a crackpot, not anymore. The official term, unidentified aerial phenomenon now, and there's the subject of serious congressional hearings. There is even a body under the U.S. Department of Defense and All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, established to investigate UAP cases and issue reports. Stigma has not stopped either military or civilian observers from observing and recording UAP for decades. As reported in Roll Call at the outset of 2022 congressional hearings, the first such high-profile proceeding since 1970 when Project Blue Book was under discussion, then House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, remarked, UAP reports have been around for decades. We haven't had any orderly way for them to be reported without stigma and to be investigated. Schiff's hearings occurred during Joe Biden's presidency, but unlike other Biden initiatives, investigating UAP did not get dropped like a hot potato when investigating UAP did not get dumped like a hot potato when President Trump assumed power. Quite the opposite. Trump has pledged to release U.S. government records that show UAP, and according to the Pentagon sales spokesperson Sue Goff, AARO has been examining over 2,000 UAP cases. And let's not leave former President Barack Obama out. He suggested on a recent podcast that aliens are real. It also must be noted that prior to the 2022 hearings, the U.S. Department of Defense has been quietly collecting data on military and other UAP sightings throughout Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program 2007 and 2012 and UAP Task Force 2017 to 21. Many longtime UAP researchers think that may have entered an era of disclosure. Not that anything has been disclosed yet. It would be possible to spend a lifetime studying UAP and everything that comes up with them. I don't mean the rest of a lifetime either. It would be the need to be the full lifetime of my youngest relative, the 6-year-old great-nephew, Walter. Good luck, Walter. As it happens, though, I have a close relationship with a longtime UAP devotee. My husband, Alan Bigelow. Alan, like thousands of others, is a member of MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. As a civilian volunteer organization that researches, investigates, and discusses UAPs, MUFON publishes a quarterly journal, holds an annual convention, and maintains a huge library of digitized UAP projects. Over the years, MUFON has developed a science-based and investigative methodology in which a field investigator is assigned to a case where someone reports a sighting or experience. Alan, a one-time MUFON investigator, can affirm that the field investigators have also passed a fairly rigorous written test. New York State has its own MUFON chapter. Luckily for my purposes, its director, John Lombardo, retired law enforcement officer, lives in Western New York. Lombardo, now 74, has been involved in MUFON for 40 years. Back in the day, people were seeing things in the sky, Lombardo said. They were seeing things in their homes. When Lombardo started paying attention, he was a member of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization like APRO's Walter Andrus, who co-founded MUFON. Lombardo transitioned to the newly expanded MUFON. It comes on waves, Lombardo said. You know, it's something on television or on the radio about a UFO sighting. New York chapter chief investigator Denise Mantione lives in Rochester. She joined MUFON when she retired from her career as a speech pathologist about 4 years ago. Apparently, the Mantione was eager to become involved because at age 14, while bicycling in her home in Greece, Rochester suburbs, she saw a very large aircraft from beyond the trees. Mantione describes the sighting as a cigar-shaped craft. Fully on YouTube, and a video can easily be found searching Denise 1973. Chief Investigator Mantione assigns cases to field investigators and maintains a database. There's a more positive rate that MUFON New York Assistant Director Tom Nessler gave me. Nessler, who lives in Rochester, estimates I would probably say 90% of them are misidentifications. Nowadays, we get a lot of calls about Starlink flying by. Starlink is SpaceX satellite that apparently looks like a string of pearls. I've never seen it. In fact, I never even noticed unusual phenomenon in the sky. Neither MUFON New York Director Lombardo, who says, for me, it's just a matter of belief and faith. It's a matter of doing research, seeing the evidence, and seeing what people have to show as evidence. I mean, even the military now is showing evidence, showing the videos of the craft that all defy explanation. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from today's Buffalo News. Time is 17 minutes after the hour. Once downtown's jewel, Amanese, is in shambles. Closed since 1995, condition of building would shock those who once knew it. Stepping into the long vacant Amanese department store building downtown is like stepping into the past. Anyone who remembers what a flagship department store was like would be shocked to see how it's crumbled in the nearly 3 decades since it's been empty. Water pours from a newly broken roof drain pipe on the ground level above a sunken landing, collecting in a pool next to patches of slippery ice on the floor. It's utter darkness, damp and cold, as we climb the rusting steps to the back staircase to the main first floor with flashlights in hand while dodging debris. Dirt and grime are everywhere. The walls, the floors, rusted steel columns and beams. Broken, shattered glass lies scattered along with a pile of wood splinters, shards and splinters. Rainwater drips from holes in the roof and upper floors, creating puddles throughout. The original wood floors are soaked, deteriorating soft and squishy underfoot. It's difficult to see the building today and imagine what it once was. A trip to Amanese on Main Street was once an event. When downtown hemmed with activity, shoppers had their pick of dozens of retail outlets. It was founded in 1867 by Robert Adams and maintained on Main Street, stalwart in his family as Adam Meldrum Anderson for more than 125 years. Downtown building is actually 5 separate buildings tied together with a single facade on Main Street. The view from the rear of the complex reveals a series of structures dating from 1892, 1896, 1909, and 1948. But its best days started to be behind it long ago when shoppers began to eschew downtown for suburban shopping malls and their dozens of options and acres of free parking. The building today reveals almost none of the past glory. The long-forgotten elevators and historic wood escalators sit unused, rusty, and deteriorating, remnants of asbestos-containing material hanging off them. The old directory board hangs next to them. There are irregular holes in walls where workers broke through to see what was on the other side. On top of the much smaller 11th floor penthouse level and an old employee lounge or a private space sits next to the pinnacle of elevator shafts, mechanical equipment in view just above cabinets and open into shafts. The only sign of progress 4 giant light wells, fences secured by temporary wood railings, have been carved from the roof down from a 10-story building, providing an avenue for natural light into the vast interior. That's because the squabbling investors had planned to put hotel rooms or apartments with interiors, front windows and back windows and balconies in the light wells. The building has always faced challenges, but over the last few years it's continued to deteriorate. Savarino said, a lot of features in the building have fallen victim to freeze and thaw, the water filtration, so it's become more expensive to redo the building now. It's his responsibility to make emergency repairs, evict unauthorized visitors, and address other issues that come up, and he's supposed to be paid equally by 2 parties in the litigation. But with the building virtually abandoned and neglected for years, there's a never-ending job. He and his contractors are almost weekly to shore up things that address code violations. If there's alarm goes off, we need to check out the building, he said, adding that kids have broken in from the adjacent Brisbane building using wooden planks to cross from one to the other, and urban adventurers have simply cut the lock on the door until Savarino installed motion detectors. Still, Savarino says the building is still solid. Not an engineer, but structurally it appears intact. Regardless of what the plan proceeds, there's significant cleanup and repair needed. The basement and 2 sub-basement flooded up to 20 feet a few years ago, and the city's water main service pipe froze and burst, allowing the water to pour in from everywhere from anyone who noticed. Whoever emerges victorious from the fight over the building's future has to pay $1 million to the city to clear a lien imposed by the city. Had to undertake to repair the underground utility vaults under Washington Street. This was a time when you could save 50% on the floor, not anymore. There's about $2 million of stuff before you get anywhere. Is the building worth it? Savarino said. The city exercises eminent domain. I don't know that they're going to come out of whole. Somebody's got to take the time and effort to go to make a go of it. Once a luxury doula, care moves into mainstream. Shakoya Stewart held one of her 6-month-old twins in her lap while Chanel Bowens held the other. As the woman caught up and the baby stared at each other quietly, Bowens came around to the key question she asks of all mothers she works with. Do you think there's anything you need more support with? Bowens is a doula, a provider of physical and emotional support before, during, and after birth care that used to be seen as a luxury and was available for those who could afford it. The country's once reluctant medical establishment is increasingly welcoming the way doulas complement doctors and nurses. With insurance coverage growing fast, parents across the economic spectrum can now take advantage. More than 30 states reimburse doulas through Medicaid, who are in the process of implementing such coverage, up to 14 in the late 2022. And according to nonprofit National Health Law Program, private insurers are starting to do the same. The changes are starting to do the same, with industry giant United Healthcare launching a new benefit this year. Without insurance, costs can vary, but cannot exceed $2,000. The changes are being driven by mounting research that shows these trained non-medical professionals can significantly improve the health of moms and babies. Expanding doula care, experts say, is a relatively inexpensive way to help reduce maternal mortality, which kills black mothers like Stewart at a rate more than 3 times higher than white women. Doula can benefit everybody, said Sierra Hill, maternal care access coordinator of Minnesota's health department. Stewart, who has Tennessee Medicaid, said Bowens shepherded her through the jitters of early pregnancy and her twin sons' blood pressure issues during delivery and C-section and baby blues after birth. I feel safe. I didn't feel like I was just by myself, said Stewart. She was my homegirl. In 2006, 3% of women in the U.S. got care from doula during a labor, according to a survey conducted by the nonprofit Childbirth Connection, and now a program that the National Partnership for Women and Families. That figure has doubled or tripled since then, researchers estimate. When Bowens was pregnant with the first of her 6 children more than 2 decades ago, a council recommended a doula. I'm like, a doula? What is that? Bowens recalled. Bowens was so inspired by the care she received, she ultimately became one herself. Oftentimes we become friends with our clients, lifelong friends. We help connect with them and the resources in the community, said Bowens, founder of Naturally Nurtured Birth Services. We cater to them so it looks different for each other. That help pays off, especially for moms of underserved communities. Research comparing two groups of socially disadvantaged mothers found that those who used doulas were 4 times less likely to have a baby with low birth weight, 2 times less likely to have a baby complication, and much more likely to start breastfeeding. Another study published last year found that Medicaid recipients with doulas had a 47% lower risk of C-sections and a 29% lower risk of preterm birth, and were 46% more likely to go to postpartum checkup. Postpartum finding is a key, said Adam Falcini, a scientist at Medicaid in 2014. A decade later, the state expanded coverage, allowing Medicaid recipients 18 sessions with doula without prior authorization, more than double which was allowed before. Now let's look at Ask Eric. Self-centered friend never picks up when called. Dear Eric, I have a lady I consider a friend, but I noticed that she only calls me when it's convenient for her. I call her to talk, and she makes everything about her. I'm really considering stopping talking to her. She says she doesn't have any friends. She's in her 70s, so I'm in my 50s, and I have said something to her about the problem. Am I wrong or not? Waiting for her friend, because sometimes when I text her, she doesn't answer, and when I call, she doesn't even answer. I think that's disrespectful. I don't do that to her. I politely respond, even if I'm busy or working, left unanswered. Dear Unanswered, it seems there are 2 issues in the friendship here. First, the misalignment in your communication styles. Second is your frustration. And when you talk about that you talk about when you want to talk. Either could be a deal breaker. Sometimes friendships run their courses, or 2 people who once were compatible find they no longer are. It's okay, you feel it's time to put some space between you. However, do consider that her phone response habits may not be a sign of disinterest or disrespect. The prevalence of cell phones and texting continues to change and reshape society. We all have different relationships to how we are available for communications and how we are. She may not always keep her phone handy, or she may simply not enjoy replying to every call or text she gets. It may help to set up a regular time to call. That way expectations get managed, and ideally she'll pick up. Dear Eric, one of my relatives is a young lady in her 30s. She's gainfully employed and is in a year-long relationship. She would like to marry her friend, who is about her age and also has a career. So far, no ring. My theory, which I'm not sharing with her, is that if a man has been with a woman for this long without a commitment to marriage, he is using her as a convenience, and she should move on. Any thoughts? No ring. My thought, respectively, are that those thoughts should continue to be kept to yourself unless your relative explicitly asks for them. Every relationship runs its own time. A year is short. They're still getting to know each other. Regardless, it seems that their timeliness aren't matching up. She's expressed a desire to marry. Even if it's premature, you can, if she wants to support her in advocating for herself or finding ways to talk through what her partner's hesitations are, or chooses to end it if she so desires. It's often better to have a wise sounding board who can help us think through problems rather than someone who is going to tell us what we should be doing. Now, as to her partner's motivations, I can't say. Relationships can be tricky. Many people feel unmoved to marry or even afraid of it. The key for any couple, even if they are aligned in what they want, is clear communication so everyone is making clear-eyed decisions. Dear Eric, I was so happy to read the questions from Lover of Flowers and Friends, where the hostess receives fresh flowers from guests and feels obligated to unwrap them, cut stems, and put them in a vase, arrange them and display them while greeting other guests and finishing up last-minute preparations. After encouraging this kind of gesture from my guests many times over my party-giving career, I've come up only with a simple solution. What I do is place several vases pre-filled with water along my kitchen counter with some in my bathrooms, and I simply pop the fresh cut flowers into already prepared vase. If the wrap is still on the flowers, I still do it and prepare the flowers the next day. During Christmas time, someone inevitably will bring me a large, beautiful poinsettia, which I don't have room for because the food and dishes I've set out. I place a table outside my front door and place the poinsettia there and bring it in at the end of the party. That way it looks like a beautiful greeting to my guests. I hope the suggestion helps your readers. Another flower lover. I really like the suggestion. It's very adept party hosting because good hospitality involves anticipating guest needs. You're anticipating that guests might need a place to put the flowers. If you're anticipating that you'll offload the task of a floral presentation to later, a win all around. I'm also quite impressed that you've cultivated a circle of friends who always come bearing bouquets. What a treat. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from today's Buffalo News. Time is 30 minutes after the hour. Now let's look at sports. In hockey, team needs to play better in first period to improve. Leave it to Rasmus Dahlin to offer a pointed assessment of Buffalo Sabres in the immediate wake of the team's third loss in 3 games. In particular, the Sabres captain had something to say after a 5-2 loss to the Detroit Red Wings on Friday at the KeyBank Center. He chided the team's response to the Red Wings' quick start. Detroit scored 3 goals in the first 17 minutes, including a pair of power play goals by Alex DeBrincat and Lucas Raymond, which helped Detroit take a 3-0 lead in the first intermission. It's unacceptable, Dahlin said. They come out really good, scored 3 early. It's hard to come back from that. The Red Wings looked like a team that was desperate to find a way into the playoffs. As they began, they 3 points out of the last wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference at 84 points. Behind the Islanders, 87, and Ottawa Senators, 86. Sabres looked like they had 2 days prior, before 3 overtime loss to the Bruins, playing without the necessary pop through the course of an entire game. In recent weeks, the Sabres have found responses to being down by a goal or 2, but also have been a team that has established its ability to protect leads. Of facing a deficit, Dahlin said, you've got to take a little bit more of a risk, and we don't like when we're in that position. Sabres created scoring chances in the early minutes of the first, but Red Wings goalie John Gibson withstood them all. Then the Red Wings capitalized on the power play. First, when DeBrincat scored with 4:02 with Josh Norris penalized for high sticking. Then Raymond scored at 9:11 when Logan Stanley was penalized for interference. Dahlin outlined what the Sabres need to do in order to establish their presence in the opening minutes. We've got to be stronger in front of the net, Dahlin said. Keep it a bit more simple. Next one mentality, just simplify, get the puck deep and stuff like that in the first, honestly. There are tactical refinements. The Sabres also have to quickly make a psychological pivot. They hosted Kraken on Saturday evening at KeyBank. I honestly thought they were going to come back. That's the mentality we have in this group. We just got to continue to have that. Not killing it. The Sabres penalty kill was 4 for 6, including a third period kill of a double minor against Tage Thompson for high sticking, but gave up 2 first period power play goals. DeBrincat's goal came 5 seconds into the penalty against Norris when he picked up a rebound off Morris Sider's shot from the point and out of reach of Sabres defenseman Connor Simmons and beat goalie Alex Lyon, 15 saves. Raymond gave the Red Wings a 2-0 lead when he scored on a shot from the left circle after Ryan McLeod tried to clear the puck, but Detroit kept the puck in the zone. The first one, we gambled a little bit in coverage right off the bat, and they threw it to the net. So it's more on us, Ruff said. Dahlin boiled down a solution. We've got to stay out of the box. We know they have a good power play. Need a turnaround. This is the first time the Sabres have lost 3 consecutive games since December 3rd through 8th when they dropped games at Philadelphia, Winnipeg, and Calgary. That was nearly 4 months ago. Still, there's not a lot of panic among the Sabres, even after a loss to the Red Wings. We're in a good spot, said Thompson, who scored his 400th point at 5 minutes and 35 seconds of the second period. We play Saturday, so to move on and get ready to focus on that. We're putting together a full. We need to put together a full 60. It's probably going to be a blessing to some degree to be playing again, Lyon said. It's not fun to sit on games like that. We're hitting a bump in the road right now. We've got to see what we're made of. We need to put our foot on the gas and reset and reassert ourselves. That's what successful teams do. That's what it's all about. UB coach Pete Lembo is looking for leaders as football spring practice begins. University of Buffalo coach Pete Lembo was clearly excited to be back on the football field when the Bulls opened. Spring practice is Wednesday. You can see the excitement in Buffalo players too, with many new faces donning the blue and white uniforms, circling around Murchie Family Fieldhouse for 2 hours. Buffalo redshirt freshman Jason Wright stretched on the field as quarterback keepers. James McNeil Jr. of Buffalo broke up the sideline for an exciting run. The entire UB team erupted during an interception that was returned for a touchdown, even exciting the recruits. UB recently reported its 2026 class is its best recruiting class in program history, watching from the sideline. It may take some time for Lembo to divvy out playing time before September 3rd opening at University of Albany at Broadview Stadium in Amherst. The Bulls welcomed 29 combined transfers and freshmen participating in Wednesday's spring practice, most in their offensive, defensive, and special teams production from 2025 have departed. As far as leaders, though, Lembo expects some to emerge sooner than later. I think it'll be a great question to revisit in 3 or 4 weeks, and I hope to have some really good answers for you, Lembo said. Leadership training. With all the departures of All-American linebacker Red Murdoch and All-Mid-American Conference first-team receivers, Buffalo's Nick McMillan, Kansas, and Rochester's Victor Snow, North Carolina, A&T, Lembo has put much thought in developing leaders. UB invested in leadership development and training throughout February and March. Lembo said Buffalo hosted 9 skill sessions that ran until spring break and again before the spring practices began. Lembo did not mention any names, but said some players with leadership qualities have emerged by leading by example in the weight room and during drill sessions. I think our guys get more comfortable with their roles and start to emerge in terms of their confidence on the field, and you start to feel their vocal leadership follow, and I'm okay with that at this point, Lembo said. Now there's a next phase to that when they actually have to put helmets on, put shoulder pads, and transform that actually into performing on the field. And then you hope, as guys get their confidence and their feet underneath them, they start to establish their roles as players. Some of them vocal leadership comes. Buffalo's 2026. Okay. However, Lembo is most worried about Buffalo's first opponent. Our primary focus is always going to be on the first opponent, and we've got a lot of new faces around here, Lembo said. Albany's got a new coaching staff themselves and a lot of new faces on their team, so there'll be a lot of questions to answer in that first game. Buffalo's Pro Day, which will include Murdoch, is Tuesday. Murdoch is projected to be selected in the later rounds of the NFL Draft, which is a 3-day event which begins April 23rd. UB hosts its spring game at 2 p.m. April 25th. Now looking at the NBA, LeBron passes to Bronny for first father-son assist. LeBron literally passed it on to the next generation Friday night. The top scorer in NBA history recorded the league's first father-son assist when he passed to Bronny James for a three-pointer in the second quarter of the Los Angeles Lakers game against Brooklyn. It was a special moment for the two of us, a lot more to come down the road, Bronny said after the Lakers beat the Nets 116-99. The Lakers' father-son duo played meaningful minutes together for the second straight game when the Lakers returned from a successful road trip to host the struggling Nets. Bronny James was on the court with his father for nearly 4.5 minutes, and they checked in together to start the second quarter. Both generations scored during their sequence together, with LeBron making a driving layup before he exchanged passes on the next possession with Bronny, who hit a three-pointer from a step behind the line. Not taking it for granted, just being in the moment, and us being on the floor once again, LeBron said. The 2 games back-to-back, playing meaningful minutes, and him also making another play. I got doubled, and he was able to fake a pass to the corner and then knock down a 3. Definitely a cool moment for us and also for the family. While discussing his latest chance to play with his father, Bronny flashed back to a pleasant father-son memory, at least for him. Last time I played him one-on-one, I don't know if it was the story has come out, but he broke a backboard at our house in Miami, Bronny said with a grin. Austin Reeves, who was listening at the next locker, chimed in, "Because you won?" Bronny nodded his smile growing even bigger. Yeah, you can say that, Reeves said. Don't leave that out. Bronny James largely played mop-up minutes this season, his second with the Lakers, while also making trips down to their G League team during the season. With starting guard Marcus Smart sidelined by an injury in the last two games, Bronny got rotational minutes with the Lakers against Indiana and Brooklyn next week. I've gotten more and more reps, getting comfortable and shooting behind the NBA line, Bronny said. Bronny's regular playing time in both leagues this season has allowed him to hone in on his offensive game. His father says his shot is returning the effectiveness it had before Bronny had to recover from getting into a cardiac arrest during a practice at the University of Southern California in 2023. It's getting back to where it was before the incident, LeBron said. He's always been able to shoot the ball. He shot the ball at a high level pretty much throughout his years of playing ball. So I just think it's just confidence and rhythm and getting his strength back and his wind and everything. Everything is coming back to where it was before the incident. So I'm not surprised to see him shoot the ball with high clip. LeBron and Bronny are the first father-son ever to play in the NBA at the same time, let alone on the same team. While Bronny has a supporting role for the Lakers, he's grateful for a chance to learn and grow. He's also a front row seat to another year of big accomplishments from his father, who set the NBA career record for games played this month. I've been waiting to play basketball my whole life, Bronny said. I knew that it was going to be my job at one point. It's a dream come true. I'm so privileged to be able to play basketball as a job, and I love every single second of it. Now let's look at Jay Skursky's Bills mailbag. Is Garrett trade possibility now on the table? Welcome back to the Bills mailbag. The NFL's annual league meeting takes place over the next few days in Phoenix, where we'll hear from Bills head coach Joe Brady. Before that takes place, let's get to your questions. Drew Shapiro asks, now that the Browns have restructured Myles Garrett's contract, does he become a possible trade target for the Bills, who will draft late in the first round this year and likely next year as well? If the Bills do not draft a wide receiver next month, is a free agent Juan Jennings a possibility to sign after June 1st if he's still available? By moving the date that payment of his option bonus is due until 7 days before the regular season begins in September, the Browns absolutely open the door to potentially trading Garrett. According to sports business website Sports Track Trading, Garrett before June 1st would result in a dead cap charge of $40 million for the Browns. Nearly $17 million more that Garrett is scheduled to count against the cap in 2026. However, if they would be free and clear of this deal after the 26th season and would likely have a ton of draft capital coming back in any possible trade. For now, it doesn't appear that a trade is imminent, but possibility can't be ignored. We know the Bills were in discussions to trade for Max Crosby, so it's not a stretch to think they would be interested in Garrett if he were to be made available. For now, the Browns are saying he's not available, but it makes no sense to me as to why a player himself wouldn't be angling for a trade. In the simplest terms, Garrett's career is being wasted in Cleveland. He should get the opportunity to play for a championship, and that darn sure isn't going to happen in Cleveland. As for Jennings, I did a roundtable debate with my colleague Lance Laskowski and identified him as one remaining free agent I'd be most interested in signing. Of course, that would go shortly before the Bills signed Trent Sherfield to a one-year contract. Sherfield expected to play a big role on special teams and is a quality blocker, which is one of Jennings' strengths as well. I'd say that makes it less likely that the Bills would sign Jennings, who appears to have priced himself out of the opening wave of free agency. Robert S. asks, if my memory serves me correct, and I'm confident that it does, when Brandon Beane came on board, when it came to the salary cap, didn't he criticize the previous regime for kicking the can down the road? Didn't he insist we didn't do business that way? Isn't that exactly what he's doing? Jay, yes. Short answer is yes. He's kicking the can down the road. All teams do it to an extent. This is not meant to sound like a Beane apologist, but there is a key difference between the two situations. The difference is the Bills have a franchise quarterback worth paying Josh Allen. Doing so makes things tighter under the cap. That is not excuse for Beane. It's reality. before being arrived, the Bills did not have a quarterback worth paying such a way, so being tight against the cap is not understandable. Again, Bean deserves some criticism for the way he's managed the cap. It would be nice to have some space to actually go shopping in free agency and deep end of the pool once in a while, but we should recognize that it's a tough balancing act. Keeping the roster competitive as possible in the Super Bowl window means kicking the can down the road. Sometimes it's necessary evil. Kevin asks, what do you think the Bills have in mind with Cedric Van Pran and Granger? It seemed last year we might be in line to be starting center in 2026, but then Anderson played center when Connor McGovern came out of the game with an injury. Then McGovern signed a new contract, and the Bills signed experienced center Lloyd Cushenberry III. Jay, the moves at center this offseason clearly put Van Granger on the roster bubble entering training camp. McGovern is the starter. To your point, Kevin Colbert has a lot of experience with 80 starts in 6 seasons. He's also played at LSU when current Bills coach Joe Brady was with the Tiger staff. Cushenberry was released last month by the Titans with a failed physical designation, so he'll be here to prove he can stay healthy, but in addition, shows that Van Pran and Granger's roster spot is not guaranteed. He'll have to earn it in training camp. I would expect the two of those in spirited competition. On a related note, it's difficult. Good example is just how difficult it is to make the NFL. Van Pran Granger is a 2-time national champion at Georgia who started his final 44 college games. He was a finalist for the Remington Trophy as the nation's top center and redshirt junior before entering the NFL. While he's got to battle with his hands just to stay in the league. Mark B. in Buffalo asks, after trading for DJ Moore and missing out on Mike Evans in free agency, considering the looming release of disgruntled wide receiver Brandon Ayuk of the 49ers, do you think Brandon B. will make an effort to sign to a veteran minimum prove-it type deal? Jay, it would be worthwhile, low-risk gamble, assuming Ayuk's head's in the right place and he actually wants to continue playing football. There has been speculation he wanted to end up in Washington and be reunited with his college quarterback, Jaden Daniels. It's been a prolonged soap opera between Ayuk and the 49ers. No team seems willing to trade for Ayuk, given his big contract and injury concerns, so it seems inevitable the 49ers will release him, and that might not come until after June 1st. There's no real hurry on their part, and the relationship between the two sides have been deteriorating to the point where the 49ers ain't likely to do Ayuk any favors. So would the Bills be interested? That depends on the timing. If Breen drafts a wide receiver early, there wouldn't seem to be any room for Ayuk. If the draft comes and goes, there isn't a wide receiver addressed, however, then Ayuk would be an intriguing addition. Free agency. Bring the pressure. Bills shift focus to creating more heat off the edge. Free agency has somewhat shifted the draft focus for all 32 teams. That's to be expected after players' arrivals and departures wind up filling and creating holes on rosters across the league. The Bills have their share of each, but their draft needs actually remain fairly steady. Amateur GMs can make a case for adding a wide receiver in the first round or even the acquisition of DJ Moore with the idea of being all in for Josh Allen. Of course, the Bills' defense has needs, and most notably an edge rusher. That gives President of Football Operations Brandon Beane plenty of options. With draft less than a month away, that makes good time to unveil our mock draft of the season. Number 1, the LA Raiders, Fernando Mendoza, QB, Indiana. There's no reason to think this pick will change between now and late April. Mendoza is far and away the number 1 quarterback prospect, and he might be the only player at the most important position in the field to be chosen in the first round. New York Jets, number 2, Arvell Reese, edge, Ohio State. The Buckeyes are going to dominate the top 10, starting with Reese, who will chase around Josh Allen twice a year as a member of the Jets. Number 3, Arizona Cardinals, Caleb Downs, safety, Ohio State. Reese isn't a lock at number 2, but he's definitely the consensus pick for the Jets. He's definitely the consensus pick for the Jets right now. That means the draft really starts getting fun here. Number 4, Tennessee Titans, Jeremiah Love, running back, Notre Dame. A safety and a running back in the top 5 speaks to how strange this year's draft has the potential to be. Number 5, the New York Giants, Carnell Tate, wide receiver from Ohio State. That's there was talk recently of Odell Beckham Jr. returning to the Giants. That shows just how desperate the G-men are to add a receiver for quarterback Jackson Dart. Number 6, Cleveland Browns, Francis Mayoga, offensive tackle, Miami of Florida. The Browns needed to replace their entire starting offensive line from a season ago. Mayoga would become the latest piece to that puzzle. Washington Commanders, number 7, David Bailey, edge from Texas Tech. There are big roster needs at the other position, but this will be a best player available pick. Bailey could go as high number 2 to the Jets. Number 8, New Orleans Saints, Mansour Delane, cornerback LSU. The Saints signed running back Travis Etienne, which shifted their draft needs, staying in state to draft Delaney, fills one of them. Number 9, Kansas City Chiefs, Reuben Bain Jr., edge from Miami of Florida. Bain doesn't have all the desired measurable, but his arm is just short of 31 inches, but he plays with violence. Chiefs need an edge rusher opposite George Karlaftis. Number 10, Cincinnati Bengals, Sonny Styles, linebacker, Ohio State. This will be a dream scenario here for the Bengals, who need help at every level of their defense. Styles transitioned from safety to linebacker during college. Strong comparisons to 49ers star linebacker Fred Warner. Number 11, Miami Dolphins, Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver, Southern California. Pick a position out of a hat. It's a good chance the Dolphins need a player at it. After trading Jalen Waddle to Denver, wide receiver is top of their list. Number 12, Dallas Cowboys, Akeem Zidore, edge, Miami of Florida. If the Cowboys don't take an edge rusher in the first round, that player is going to have to deal with the inevitable comparisons to Micah Parsons. This is a tough situation to walk into. Number 13, we have Los Angeles Rams, Jordan Tyson, wide receiver, Arizona State. Rumors are the Rams kicked tires on adding receiver A.J. Brown in a trade with the Eagles. That indicates they're serious about adding to the position. Number 14, Baltimore Ravens, Alvatiga Ione, guard, Penn State. After losing center Tyler Lindenbaum, the Ravens need to beef up the interior of their offensive line. Number 15, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Keon Siddiqui, tight end, Oregon. They have a couple of drops during last season, and he surely went back, but Siddiq is clearly the number 1 tight end in the class. He would give quarterback Baker Mayfield another weapon after the Bucs lost Mike Evans in free agency. Let's look at the Buffalo Bills. We're going to go down to 26 now. Cassius Howell, edge rusher from Texas A&M. Bean has always said he prioritizes his game film over measurables when evaluating prospects, and this pick would be proof of that. On the field last season, Howell's production was elite. He won SEC Defensive Player of the Year after finishing with 11.5 sacks. He's got the great first step and ability to get off the edge. The concern, if you call it that, is his arms are short, 30.25 inches for an NFL edge rusher. Well, the Bills overlooked that, and can Howell overcome that. Drafting an edge rusher makes sense. The Bills do need a better job of getting after the opposition quarterback. The team has 2 outside linebackers, Rousseau and Bradley Chubb, who should be starters, but depth behind them is lacking, especially if Michael Heck coming off a torn Achilles. However, Howell could begin his career as a designated pass rusher on third downs. It's a good fit. Now let's look at the scoreboard. The NHL on Friday, Detroit Red Wings 5, Buffalo Sabres 2. New York Rangers 6, Chicago Blackhawks 1. Sunday's games, Florida at the Rangers at 1 p.m., Boston at Columbus at 5 p.m., Montreal Canadiens at the Carolina Hurricanes at 5 p.m., Nashville at Tampa Bay at 5 p.m., Chicago at New Jersey at 7, Dallas at Philadelphia also at 7. Let's look at the scoreboard for the National Basketball Association. Friday's games, the LA Clippers 114, Indiana Pacers 113, Boston Celtics 109, Atlanta 102, Cleveland 149, wow, since Miami 128, Houston 119, Memphis 109, Oklahoma City 131, Chicago 113, Toronto Raptors 119, New Orleans 106, Denver 135, Utah 129, Dallas 100, Portland 93, Golden State 131, Washington 126, the LA Lakers 116, Brooklyn 99. Sunday's games, the Clippers are at Milwaukee at 3:30, Miami at Indiana at 5, Boston at Charlotte at 6, along with Orlando at Toronto at the same time, Sacramento at Brooklyn again at 6, Washington at Portland, Houston at New Orleans at 7 p.m. New York at Oklahoma City at 7:30. Golden State at Denver at 10 p.m. Let's look at the college basketball scoreboard. Midwest Finals, the regionals. Friday results: Michigan 90, Alabama 77, Tennessee 76, Iowa State 62. Sunday's game: Michigan versus Tennessee at 2:15 p.m. The West Regional. Let's look at the score: Purdue 79, Texas 77, Arizona 109, Arkansas 88. Saturday, the Final Four will be on April 4th. The East champion versus the South champion, the West champion versus Midwest champion. National championship will be April 6th. Semifinal winners. That will looks like pretty much it. Let's look at the women's basketball as well. National semifinals, April 3rd. This is for the, hold on, let's get back here. The women's NCAA tournament on, let's go back. NCAA tournament, Notre Dame, Friday, Notre Dame 67, Vanderbilt 64, UConn 63, North Carolina 42. Sunday's game, Notre Dame at UConn at 1 p.m. Semifinals and finals, Golden One Center, Sacramento, California. Friday's results: UCLA 80, Minnesota 56, Duke 87, LSU 85. Sunday's game: UCLA versus Duke at 3 p.m. Fort Worth 3 regional semifinals and finals. Michigan versus Louisville played on Saturday, along with Texas and Kentucky. Monday's game will be the semifinal winners. Sacramento regional, Garden One Center, Sacramento. South Carolina versus Oklahoma was Saturday, along with Virginia at TCO. Monday's game will be the semifinal winners. The Final Four national semifinals will be April 3rd, Fort Worth versus Sacramento. In Sacramento, the second game versus Fort Worth, third. National championship will be the semifinal winners. The women's NIT tournament, Wednesday's result: Army 74, LaSalle 63. Thursday's result: Cleveland State 66, Middle Tennessee 56. South Dakota 73, Pepperdine 57. Montana State 72, Portland 54. Friday's result: Arkansas State 83, Purdue Fort Wayne 72, George Washington 71, Loyola 62, Marshall 72, Youngstown State 46, Illinois State 59, and Abilene Christian 55. Quarterfinals: Sunday's game, Montana State at South Dakota at 2 p.m. Monday's game, Army at Marshall, George Washington at Illinois, and Cleveland State at Arkansas State at 8 p.m. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for March 29th. We read from the Buffalo News on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast it at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your reader today has been Ron Bickelman.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of Buffalo Magazine. Following that, at noon, is the Sunday Gusto. And at 1 o'clock is the Sunday front section of the New York Times. Stay with us for these readings and more. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability